All right, it looks like we are live. Everyone, thank you for joining us for another Musician Monday. I'm Corey, the digital marketing manager with the Grand Rapids Symphony. And today, my guest is section bass Jonathan Reed. John, how are you today?
I'm very good, Corey. How are you?
Yeah, I'm wonderful. It's good to see you. I don't get to see many of our colleagues and our musician friends, even the office staff. We're all working from home, so it's nice to see people when I get the chance to. Thank you so much for being here today. And I want to remind folks that at the end of the session here, we're going to have a quick Q&A. So if you have questions you want to ask John, feel free to put them in the chat here on the YouTube video, and we'll definitely do what we can to address them at the end. So the first question I always ask John, everyone gets this question is, how long have you been part of the orchestra?
Well, it's a little bit of a loaded question for me, but I have, as an official member, this will be going on my third year, so I'm still pretty new, but I've been playing with the symphony pretty regularly as a substitute musician since 2014. So it's been about 6 years of pretty regular, professional life for me, and then maybe once or twice, before that. But yeah,
Very good. I forget. Are you a Michigan native?
yes,
Okay, very good.
yep.
And I remember one thing too, that we both have a connection to St. Joe because you played with the Southwest Michigan Symphony, and I was there as a development intern many years ago.
Oh,
So
were you? I actually didn't know that.
yeah, I was there for a brief time. I actually, before I got this job, that was my volunteer internship. I was working down there in the development department.
Oh,
So
that's very cool. Well, I have a history with that orchestra just because that's where I grew up. So, and then if my parents are watching, they were also musicians in that orchestra as well. So,
that's excellent. That's so great to know. I didn't know that part of it. That's awesome. So the bass, why did you choose the bass? Did the bass choose you? I mean, what happened there?
yeah, um, I don't, it's kind of maybe 50-50 on that. I definitely had when in fifth grade, when fifth grade comes around, is at the time in St. Joseph's Public Schools, they were starting instruments in fifth grade, which is the last level at elementary school, and I had it narrowed down to bass, viola, and trombone, and I liked the darker sonority uh, instruments and maybe more accompanimental support instruments, and so we were talking as a family at the Reed household, and I think my dad persuaded me to go towards the bass a little bit. I remember that. I think maybe just because I think I remember him saying something along the lines of there's not very many good bass players, uh, which is not totally true, but it is more true than maybe violin and other things, because there's just so many more people that play the violin. So the numbers game probably does help a little bit as a bass player, I imagine. Um, but yeah, and then also being the jazz, my dad liked jazz a lot, so maybe he thought I could play with him. But I never went down that road. But yeah, so the bass, I kind of it was a I always liked the bass, and was excited about. And then when I started playing it, like actually taking lessons and playing it, then I was like, man, this is great. Yeah, I don't see myself wanting to play something else.
I love that. That's so great. Do you play electric bass as well?
I did quite a bit more when I was starting. I was playing them a little bit more equally, and I was probably listening to more, you know, music with electric bass then. But I still listen to it a little bit now. But yeah, I do play electric. I have an electric bass that sits in my music room. Actually, it doesn't sit; it hangs, and I always like looking at it. I don't play it that much anymore, but it's out of the case, and I get to at least appreciate it right now.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So, thinking about your upright bass, your the one you play with the orchestra, that specific instrument. Is there any cool factoids or anything unique about your instrument itself?
Yeah, it's a contemporary modern double bass made here in America. It's made by I believe an immigrant. His name is Albert Jackstadt, and I believe he's German. and Bavarian to be more specific. And I think I've heard that he was a furniture maker
Wow.
long time before becoming a bass maker. And now he just makes exclusively double basses, probably like 4 a year, I imagine. Lives in Georgia. And I think my wood is made of Georgia weeping willow, the willow tree. So yeah, it's pretty cool, and it's a little cheaper than the maple that you see a lot of instruments being made out of. So it helped the finances a little bit. But it's also, and from my experience, very resonant and very flexible to vibrations and everything. And it's a little lighter, maybe also, even though it's a big bass that I have, so it's pretty heavy still. But yeah, it's been a great bass. So yeah.
That's awesome. I like that it's unique to you in a lot of ways, and that's cool. I like uniqueness in instruments, so I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Um, so I know this is a loaded question because you live and breathe music. Do you have a favorite composer?
I do. I had to think a little bit because it is a hard thing to answer as a musician for sure. I mean, we don't tend to maybe want to put ourselves in a box too much with that. But upon thinking about it some more, I think Brahms would probably be my favorite composer, at least to play in the orchestra. And that goes a lot with because of Brahms's father was actually a bass player. So
Yeah.
I think he really was thinking about that, when he was writing his compositions. I mean, how could you not, right?
Hmm.
Uh, and he was pretty famous for judging compositions based on just the bass line and the melody alone, or sometimes just the bass line. He would just totally throw everything out and look right to the harmony and where it was going and the counterpoint. And I really feel that when I'm playing his symphonies. The bass is a lot more important than it usually is, let's just say, in Brahms symphonies. It I think they can like stand by itself. I mean, when I'm playing a Brahms excerpt, I think it's almost like a solo a little bit. It seems almost. I mean, it's obviously in the orchestra range and register of the bass, but it sounds good by itself without hearing the rest of the orchestra. Whereas some excerpts, you play it and you're like, without the orchestra behind you, just by yourself, and it just doesn't sound right. So I think Brahms for me. But I think Beethoven is a close second. I think the energy and the excitement and just the work process that Beethoven went through to write his compositions, I really admire. It didn't come, he worked very hard for what he got, and it shows. And but then I was also thinking, overall, outside of the orchestra, um, still within classical music, I think Bach for me,
Hmm.
because I just think Bach gives the listener so much room for interpretation on their own. They get to feel it how they want to, and as a performer, they get to perform it how they want to. And some composers just don't do as well for that as Bach does, because you can hear one recording of Bach's cello suites, and then you can hear another recording, and they're both very great, but they're very different. And I think Bach gives a lot more room for that than other composers. So yeah.
That's a really great explanation too of Bach. I guess I've thought about it, but I haven't really thought about it. So I'll have to look for that next time I listen to some Bach. Do you now? Some people have this. People don't. It's okay if you don't. Do you have a pre concert ritual or tradition you do before you get on stage?
Yeah, it's kind of evolving still, but it's not much of anything like a routine really. But I've tended to over time liked getting to the hall earlier and earlier,
Hmm.
so that I feel settled and just have a slow amount and process of taking the bass out of the case and tuning it and getting the rosin levels right and making sure my bow is tight enough and all those things. Which if you're rushed or you have a lot of commitments before and you're flying in, you'll be halfway through a concert or a rehearsal and your bow is not tight enough. You don't have enough rosin on your bow. And you have to actually warm it up a little bit. You have to warm the rosin up on your bow. So it takes about a couple minutes. So you can't just jet in And so that's kind of what I do. I try to get there and warm up the fingers a little bit in various ways. I don't have a certain exercise or anything. I just try to warm up the fingers. But yeah, that's kind of a routine, I think, a little bit.
I would agree that yeah, that's a great way to do it. And I guess I personally I don't think about like the situations like that with rosin, making sure your bow's tight enough and everything. And because if something happens during the show, you're kind of out of luck for that minute.
I
So
mean, you sometimes see us in the section. I mean, like, whenever we're not playing a note, we can tighten and loosen. But obviously, while you're playing a passage, it can be very annoying, especially if it's off the string or stuff where you need the tightness or articulation, and it's really it can affect your playing, and then therefore maybe affect the section sound. So you try to, oh, okay, I got to get my bow tight, tighter or looser or whatever. And sometimes we probably play around with it too much also, but
that's okay. It's all good.
yeah.
Looking at I know just a little while ago you said that like the bass, you wouldn't want to have another instrument. But I'm going to ask you, if there was another instrument in the orchestra that you could choose to play, what do you think it would be?
Yeah, so I just I just love playing string instruments so much, and I can't. It's hard for me to see myself playing another uh, family of instruments.
Okay.
Um, if I had to play, if you were forcing me to play another instrument that wasn't a string instrument, it would be the French horn. I think it would be the horn. I think it's just they get all the best stuff. They get it's such a great instrument because it can do, and I think a lot of other people are saying this too on your Monday, interviews here. But it just really it is that great of an instrument. I mean, come on, they get all the best licks in Mahler, and all the orchestral rep. They get all the solos, and then it also blends well. They can support too. They can play the supportive roles and play all those different chords. Four horns are playing four different parts, and they're just playing all the different chords, and just and it can even kind of be in the woodwind family a lot of times too with chamber music. I mean, it's such a versatile instrument, and of course the sound. But for me, I think if I had to choose another instrument overall, it'd probably be viola.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just the supportive role of the viola and the bass. We stick together, bassists and violists. We're a pair, pretty
I
much.
like that.
Yeah.
That's great. That's a great answer. I am really. It's fun to hear everyone talk about the French horn. So when we get one of our first French horn musicians on this interview, we'll have to gush about that a little bit too. But
Right. Yeah. You pick.
that is
You,
the
you
popular
pick the
consensus.
best. Yeah.
So thinking about music outside of symphonic or chamber music, what kinds of music, styles of music, bands do you like? Like, what would we find on your playlist?
Yeah. So when I lately I kind of go with with what Spotify is recommending for me based on what I've clicked. But so for me that tends to be a lot of like Bela Fleck and the Flecktones and like Victor Wooten and funk, a lot of like Earth, Wind and Fire, Sly and the Family Stone. I also listen to bluegrass. So I'm a huge fan of Chris Thile.
Hmm.
Um, and of course, I said Bela Fleck, so any of his bluegrass stuff. Edgar Meyer, he's a bass player, but he plays a lot with Bela Fleck. Um, I really like this bass player named Abhishek Cohen, who used to play a long time with Chick Corea,
Hmm.
and his stuff is just incredible. He's way at the top. And then there's a kind of a folk country artist named Sarah Jaros. I might be mispronouncing that, but I think she's based in Austin, Texas. She's really great too. So I don't listen to just classical music, so it's kind of a little bit all over.
You just mentioned funk music. Do you know Wolfpack?
Wolfpack?
Wolfpack, yeah.
I actually don't. You're gonna have to send me some
I'm gonna
stuff.
send you their bass player is ridiculous.
Yeah,
He is I'm not a bass player, but I follow bass music a lot because I love
yeah,
it. So you said Victor Wood in my mind, my ears perked up, and
yeah.
so I'm gonna send you a link after this interview so you
Oh
can.
yeah, please do. Yeah.
All right. So my next question that I ask everyone is, if you could choose a career Besides being a professional musician, do you have any idea of what that would be?
I to be honest, I haven't really thought about that much because as a musician, you just kind of get so wrapped up in what you do and in your passion for that, and it kind of just it's like a just going over and over and over. But if it was outside of music, I'd still like to entertain the idea of being creative in some way or fashion, and probably because we just watched the Hobbit trilogy recently,
Mhm.
but there's all these special features on that. If you get like the Blu-ray um, extra special features, I mean, it's like 40 hours of special features or something. You can sit there and watch about how they make this film, and then also the Lord of the Rings, which I think we haven't watched yet, the special feature stuff. But what those the why I bring that up is just because I'm fascinated with the idea of being like the concept designers of just being in charge of drawing and the visionary aspect of a film or cartoons or comics or whatever. And there was these two illustrators that would be drawing all the pictures of the movies, and they had them and that they were a big part of how that movie came together with Peter Jackson, of course. But um, that seems really cool, drawing and imagining things and then seeing it put to life. Yeah.
Concept art is so fascinating to me. I think of even like Star Wars, and there's a gentleman, forget his name, but he Ralph McQuarrie, and he was one of the guys who did a lot of the original like sketching the concept art for Star Wars, and that stuff is so fascinating. It's so cool.
It is. I mean, I have no skills in this regard. I'll put that out, but I'd like to think that I could develop them over time. So,
Very good. So you may not be an illustrator, but do you have any hidden talents or special skills we don't know about?
yeah, yeah, it's a little bit of in the baby maturing process, but I am establishing myself as a viola da gamba player.
There you
Uh,
go.
so that's a little bit outside the symphony, but I've found it really helps my symphonic playing, I think, and just general musicianship. So I tend to like things outside the symphony that also complement the symphony in my musicianship. So this is one of those things, and whenever I have time to put into practicing or performing on the gamba, or in English it's pronounced bass viol because there's different sizes, and I play the biggest one. If someone saw it, they'd probably think it was a cello. So
That's
yeah,
great.
it's great. It's great.
We just had Nancy, who is a supplemental musician for the viola section, do a video
Yeah.
playing viola da gamba. That was really cool. So that's really awesome. So with the quarantine right now, I'm sure you had a disruption in your routines. What kinds of things are you doing right now to keep yourself centered during quarantine?
Right. Reading when I can. Um, Although lately it's not been so much because I'm busy, but when I am not so busy, I love just sitting there with a good book. Um, and of course, practicing. You know, I have to say that no, I don't. But I do find comfort in that. I think just touching the instrument and finding ways to grow uh, is rewarding in itself, even if you're not necessarily making an improvement that day. Um, it still feels like a day well spent, I guess. And like I already mentioned, the gamba, so the bass and gamba practicing, reading, and I also play a little bit of video games on the side. Um, so yeah, I think that's mostly what I mean. Trying to get outside a little bit more too, and I wouldn't say I'm a runner year round, but in the summer when it's nice outside, I try to get outside more to do that, and it's very slow running. That's probably more like jogging.
So one thing I noticed with some of our musicians, I had two individuals. One who said that because practicing is still obviously a big part of what you do with your routine, anyways. But one mentioned how they were kind of revisiting music they hadn't touched in years. Another one said they were only focusing on new stuff they hadn't known, trying to get their skill, like trying to push their skills in that way. Do you find yourself leaning either way, like towards practicing new things, or just going back and to enjoy older pieces that you may have played before?
Yeah, I would say overall, if I had to pick one, I've definitely centered more towards new pieces, new repertoire, new techniques, new etudes, new. Um, that being said, I do have to occasionally. I'm doing a, a workshop, sort of Detroit Symphony summer intensive program, like in a week, next week actually, and so I'm having to play all and perform and work up excerpts I've been playing since high school for that. So that's more like old stuff, trying to find new ways to practice. But mostly what I've been doing is quarantine is new Bach cello suite movements and that kind of stuff. So
That's great. So we're getting towards the end of my list here, and I want to remind folks, if you have any questions that you want to ask John, feel free to put them in the comments. We're already getting some so far. Do you have any favorite memories with the GRS that stick out in your head? Whether it be a specific performance or getting to play a piece that you wanted to, anything of that nature?
yeah, I would say with the season opener,
Mhm.
this season's opener with Augustin Hadlick, and I believe it was Brahms Symphony Number One, which is probably my favorite symphony of all time. Maybe with a Beethoven symphony in there, but yeah, that really stuck out to me because I think the Beethoven Violin Concerto is probably my favorite violin concerto, and then Augustin Hadlick is probably my favorite violinist,
Oh, there you go.
and Brahms one being my favorite symphony. I think that was the a very very special performance for me. I also think back to GRS's performance of Ein Heldenleben, which was a few years back now, I believe. But I wasn't living here at the time, and I had to fly from Miami to come play that, and it was so nice to actually perform that work at a high level. I think it doesn't get performed that much because it's just so taxing on the musicians, and it can be long to listen to something, hard on the audience maybe to listen to something that long without like a break, because there's no like movements. It's a tone poem, so I just feel like it doesn't get performed that often. So it was only my second time playing it, and that really sticks out to me as well. So I think with GRS, those two for sure. I also really, in January, was it Peter Ungen was here, and what was it, Shostakovich 11, or yeah, that one was awesome.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, that was also very special.
Lots of great shows. I remember, yeah, Heldenleben. Remember being in the crowd and watching it and really enjoyed it. Remember people getting emotional around me, so that speaks volumes to you guys about the power of that piece and everything. Yeah, well, so we're at the end of my question. Looks like we do have one question for you. Um, and this is a question that it's a very unique one. What is your favorite Michigan beer?
That's probably a pretty easy one for me. I mean, I guess Bell's Two Hearted Ale would be my go-to.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's a good choice. Yes,
Yeah.
Bell's is great. So is Founders. People like Founders too. So, lots of great breweries in Grand Rapids and the West Michigan community. So we're very fortunate in that sense.
Absolutely.
All right, it looks like we are at the end of our time today. John, thank you so much for being here, for talking for a little while about who you are, and I'm sure our watchers and tuners in listeners got to get a glimpse of you. And now when they see you on stage, they'll go, "Hey, I know that guy."
Yeah.
So, thanks
Say
everyone.
hi.
Sorry, what?
Oh, come say hi to the bass section. I'm just saying.
Yep, definitely. All right, everyone. Until next time, we'll see you later. Take it easy.